All right, there we go. All right, everyone. Hello, YouTube. Hope you guys are all having a great weekend and continuing on to back here. I am with Duff. Duff, say hello.
Hey everyone, how goes your week?
Hope everyone's doing all right. Over here in the US, we are, or at least in Ohio, there's some crazy weather. As in, I get cold pretty easily, so I thought it was very, very cold this week. It was between 60 and 40, even hit 34 degrees, I believe, one of the work mornings. So I was freezing my butt off, but I get pretty cold at about 60 degrees, so I was wearing almost doing winter clothes. But we are now the furnace is on and temperatures are doing better. But speaking of, how is the sounds? Hopefully you have good weather in where you are there, Duff.
Oh yes, we have a nice balmy 18 degrees Celsius.
18 degrees Celsius.
Yep.
Oh wow! I okay, and is that gonna be the general temperature for the next the end of the year, or is that just a for now thing? Or wow.
Oh no. Yeah, that's actually usually the end of our October is quite nice here. And I sort of I function optimally between about -2 and 20 degrees. So this is perfect for me.
-2. So would you like melt at like 40 degrees or 50 degrees?
Hang on, let me do the conversion. So
Oh,
60 degrees
crap.
Fahrenheit is 15 degrees Celsius. So that's totally good for me. I would love that weather.
Wow. Okay. Well, I guess you're living in the right spot. That's interesting. I don't know if we can. We'll see if we ever meet. Then it'll be interesting to see who sweats or who melts or freezes first. That'd be kind of a fun time. But wow, that's crazy. Anyway, cool. Well, I'm glad you guys are. I'm glad the weather is enjoyable for you. So that sounds good. But anyway, everyone is. Hopefully you've heard, or if you haven't heard, then you can listen to here and find out. It's been uh, kind of a slow news week, only because a lot of the same thing has been happening. But overall, the one of the bigger stories of the news week, we can kind of take care of the um, big but not necessarily relevant, I guess is a good way of putting it, categorizing that. If you haven't heard already, the great Senator Elizabeth Warren is taking a hierarchy or a genetics test to figure out how Native American she is. And I don't have all the numbers in front of me now, or the research, or the people that did the test, but they are, as I've been told, very well researched. I think one of the gentlemen who did the test was online to win a Nobel Peace Prize. But anyway, very, very scholarly people, and they did a test to describe the percentage that Elizabeth Warren was Native American, and it was really funny. So, and just a little precursor, she told President, or I guess President Trump made a bet with her, saying he'd pay her $1 million if she proved she was Native American. And the results came back, and now I think the number was like she's 99.99 something percent white. Like she is like whiter than Snow White. It was crazy. The one of the articles I read talked about, I think an average American would be like 1.1 or something percent Native American. So literally the majority of Americans are more Native American than Elizabeth Warren is. So it was just really, I think she had 124th Native American in her. It was ridiculous. Um and
Even
I
more
think
specified. So it was 1,024th.
okay, thank you. It was a little ridiculous. And so then there's the question of why does this matter? And there's um obviously where the Democrats are trying to pick and choose themselves for the 2020 election, which a little farther away right now. We're headed to the November elections in a few days at this rate. So that's a reason why she could be doing this kind of thing. But it's a little bit, to me, a little crazy to say that you've done all these things, and she based this off of her cheekbones and tried to go and defend the Native American heritage. And they've even, I don't remember the group, but there's even been the Native American organization that said, hey, stop minding your own business. You're not Native American. We don't want you here, kind of thing. But anyway, that's one of the big stories. Duff, any thoughts or anything? I mean, I guess you're more Native American maybe than she is, but any reaction for you?
uh, this story sort of highlights how politicians are just as much actors as anything else. And you sort of build your resume and you build the character that you're intending to be. And of course, uh, Elizabeth Warren, I think, actually started out as a lawyer and then actually taught at, was it UCLA in the law schools? Um, and then, of course, went into politics. And one of the things she's been talking about is how her family has indigenous heritage or Aboriginal heritage, or as you're saying, their AAA Native American heritage. And that was very much part of how she conceived of her family. Um, and that it's kind of an odd thing because it's like, who is she selling to? Because her claims to her indigenous heritage go way before sort of the popularity of the victimology stack, where it's like you break people down based off of their ethnicity, and then their social class and just other stuff like that, including gender. So this seems to have been a bit which she just decided to hold on to too long. Maybe because she honestly thought that she was much closer in relations, or it's something like her family appreciated certain parts of indigenous culture and tried to adopt aspects of it. But we don't necessarily know. The kicker, though, is that this should even be an issue to begin with. But what are your thoughts? Because this is such a weird story.
Well, I don't know. I mean, do you think this helps or hurts her? Or do you think this does anything at all? I mean, this is yeah, I agree. It's. I mean, do you think it helps or hurts her there, Duff? I mean, at all?
I don't think it actually hurts her per se. If we're looking at voting demographics, and unfortunately, Indigenous peoples in the United States, as far as I know, don't seem to vote all that consistently. Um, and I'm not sure if they would see this as a political issue so much as just as an annoyance, because, of course, I think it was a Cherokee chief who came out and was speaking on behalf of their particular nation state, saying, like, we wish she wouldn't do this because the qualifications or what we use to identify people of indigenous descent are not purely genetic. So they actually leave her a door there where it's like, we don't actually look at percentages, but we do look at is other factors, including that. So, for instance, here in Canada, if you are a First Nations or Indigenous person, I think it's fifth generation that they'll continue to consider you as a candidate for the financial incentives or the tax breaks. But if you move off reservation and you basically cut ties, or you cut ties with your particular band, you can lose your Indigenous status a lot sooner. So it ultimately comes down to politicking, but whatever she decided to gain out of this, I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's. I mean, well, I mean, I don't know. Would you say that? I mean, I don't know if you heard the comment about her using this to say, "Hey, I'm Native. I'm a minority. You should like me there." Do you think there's any truth to that, or do you think it was just a way for her to kind of attempt to stick it to Trump?
Um, no, I don't think it would be. It was initially a attempt to stick it to Trump because remember, she's been claiming this far before the sort of victimology stack or the progressive stack has been a thing. In fact, she was claiming it all the way back when she was a professor at, I think, UCLA Law, or was it Harvard Law? I forget which one it was. I'll have to check that out. But she's never used it, as far as we can tell, to get into places where she ought not to have. It's just been more sort of a personal character trait, which she was quite enamored of. The kicker being that she was very upfront about this without necessarily the evidence to back it up. And if you're going to use it to sort of create your public personality and you haven't actually based it on anything factual, you're going to get stuck on it at some point. And she's been called out, and rightfully so. It's kind of like, so I think a fair analogy would be to say, if Donald Trump were to say, "Oh, I have absolutely no German heritage," and then it turns out that his father's name before they changed to Trump was Drumpf, and they are definitely coming from Germany. So it's laying claim to certain cultural ties which you don't have. Is that a crime or particularly, let's say, reprehensible? It depends on what you're claiming. And she was never claiming to have been hard done by because of her status, but rather that she appreciated her status.
Yeah, I suppose that's. I mean, she's the. I don't know. I kind of felt like she tried to use the well, I'm a minority and I've had a tough life, and here we go. In which if you look at her history, she's not necessarily, even if she was more Native American than she claims to be. I mean, she kind of. Not to say that she grew up with a silver spoon, but she had a lot of opportunity. She grew up in a had a rich childhood and many many ways to succeed. So the whole like, oh, what was me? I came from nothing. Blah blah blah. I hope she wouldn't use that story because that would kind of be a lie, which obviously would be very stupid. But yeah, this is a very odd and very silly thing to do, and you'd think that there'd be more of a thought process. I mean, I've even heard some stories where she could have done this the right way and had the information. I guess not changed, but the way that it was all done, saying, "Okay, hey, here we go," and without her knowing the end results. I mean, it would make more sense to say, "Hey, I have the proof. Here we go, and here's how it goes." Well, unfortunately, even with that being said, she relied on the media, rightly so, to help her out. And I mean, once once the proof came out, even the media goes, "Oh yeah, well, if whoever says that she's not Native American is just this awful person, and she has proven her point, there is hard evidence that shows she is what she says she is, and whatever else." So it's just kind of, I mean, not to say, "Oh, this was fake news," but it does kind of push the point that there is, they're covering for her, and that's kind of really annoying when again you have the not analogy, but the idea of, hey, this isn't right. Well, no, it's fine. Don't look what's in front of you. What's in front of you that you can physically see is a lie. What I'm telling you is the truth. And the average person goes, no, 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 no. The thing she said isn't right because there's a test that he did, and it says that you're lying to me. Oh no, no, we're fine. And so it's just um I can't remember the name of they have that in games and movies is the trying to disbelieve what's going on. Like it's so obvious. Like now, like, we can't break from reality. It's stupid. So anyway, I think that this was funny. It was interesting to see her kind of fall on her face basically. So hopefully this will. I mean, it was entertaining. It is more or less. Her base is her base. Trump's base is Trump's base. I don't think things will really change. But with that being said, have you seen anything more about contenders for the Democratic, um, I guess, Democratic candidates running for president there anymore, Duff? I mean, I've been told that there are more plans to do campaigns and debates and things, within the Democratic Party. But I don't know if you've heard anything more about progress for who people want to vote for in the Democratic side.
Um, Not really. So the one story which I had heard is essentially elements of the Democratic Party asking Bernie Sanders not to run, um, simply because he's kind of old and past it, and a lot of the let's say social Democrats who could run or align with him are quite a bit younger. Um, so it would seem that they're sort of pushing out some of the older people. I know that Hillary would like to run again, but she's just going to be sort of perennial in that regard. The big question, I think, has to come down to whether or not what is it? The Democratic Convention or DNC actually is willing to play fair this time, as opposed to having a pre-selected candidate who they're going to pave the road for to the detriment of everybody else. Now, it's like if I do a Google search, the nominees don't appear to be popping up, so it doesn't appear to be a huge issue yet. But on a article which actually came from July of this year, the number one had been Bernie Sanders, followed by Elizabeth Warren, followed by Kamala Harris. And then Joe Biden being a fourth. But from what I understand, coming from people like Ben Shapiro, they actually figure Joe Biden's probably getting up that list as opposed to moving down it.
Yeah, I heard the same thing. I heard that he's up there. Bernie's lower. Bernie, Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, they're on the list. Hillary is really low, and I mean, I think what even Cory Booker and what's his name? Avenatti. I can't remember the guy's name. He's also on that list. I want to say too. That's just
Oh, Michael Avenatti, yeah, yeah, the lawyer of the porn star who might flip
creepy
it for
porn lawyer, as
presidency.
Tucker Carlson calls him. Yeah, that's just
Yeah, but either way, it's hard to tell, being both outside of the country and sort of outside of the loop, to see who is really pulling strong numbers and whether or not the Democratic base is sort of marshaled itself into let's get ready for election mode. I know last time we talked about them wanting to have some debates coming up, and I had given voice to some suspect. Sorry, I was somewhat suspect of their ability to actually run a debate, simply because so many of them are feelings platforms people. So it's just going to become a victimology off. And if it does become a victimology off, all the white people should get off the stage to begin with, followed by all the remaining men, and then followed by anyone who is not trans. So if they can find a trans candidate who happens not to be white, that'll be the head of the Democratic Party.
that sounds about right. Well, then we've already got rid of Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, and well, no, I take it back. She's a woman and she's Native American, but she's not trans. The only contenders I can think of are Kamala Harris and actually no, the didn't wasn't it Chelsea something is now trans woman, so I guess she could do it. And she's the only one I can think of that would be a candidate. Do you remember who I'm talking about? Chelsea something. She was the trans. I can't remember the original person. Does that?
Uh, is she in politics or something else there, Triple A?
I think yeah, it was. She's in politics. She had. I think she was running for. I want to say it was mayor, or senator, but given the prereqs you're describing, she's the only one who is a trans woman. So I guess she would be the only contender to actually make sense. Although she's also white, so maybe not. But well, based on those criteria, I guess they don't really have much of an option, do they? Wow.
Yeah, no, and so much of it becomes so hypocritical because if it does boil down to a whole bunch of white people on the stage yelling at one another, well, they're not actually living up to their own expectations. Yet they're claiming that they are the correct party, in fact, the only just and true party to rule. And it raises a lot of questions. It would be nice to see some Democratic candidates from the more center and actually center-leaning part of the party come up and basically be like, hey, guys, this is just asinine and silly. We're about good governance. We're also about providing social care for people. But we're also about more than just identifying victims and trying to make everything a grievance issue. But I don't see any of those candidates popping up yet.
Yeah, that's true. Well, this is an interesting question. Do you have a? I mean, I think it'd be. I'd love for Clinton to be in the running. That'd be awesome because that definitely would be very very fitting to see her, um, fall on her face again. And of course, I heard an interview she tried to take credit for. Oh yeah, those Antifa people, they're protesting, and we must be uncivil to those that are uncivil. So I hope that she gets back into the ring and starts doing some stuff. Um, but now, no, I'm curious. Is there anyone that if you were to be on I guess we'll say the leftish side, do you have a I wish that this person would run a candidate for the on the for the Democratic side?
No, sadly, I don't have any deeper insights into your country's politics at the moment. The
It's
only
not
the
very
only names that
detailed.
I tend to see are the ones which get passed around on the news and in the internet. And I have a feeling that the establishment within the Democratic Party is still strong enough that they will be able to shoehorn one of the top three candidates in, regardless of what they actually espouse. And that's where I think Bernie is actually going to get burned again, simply because he keeps on switching from the Democrat to independent back to Democrat back to independent. And policy wise, and also in terms of social doctrine, as it were, he's a hypocrite. He's an old white wealthy guy espousing socialist views. And you go, well, can't really sell him. And Cortez is perhaps too new and too outspoken at the point. She needs some seasoning. So I think it'll probably come down to a Kamala Harris, a Warren, or a Biden.
Well, I mean, well, Biden would talk smoothly, but again, he's one male, so that's a little difficult there too. But you mentioned, yeah, I mean, Kamala Harris or I guess Cortez could be a better fit. By the way, since you mentioned her, did you see the latest Cortez's the new threat to our civilization kind of spiel that she went on her last public talk?
Conservatism is basically the cause of global warming, essentially what she said.
I don't remember if it was. I know it was something along the lines of like global warming is the next biggest threat, and we need to eradicate it like Nazis or something in those lines. I think.
Oh yeah, that line too. Yeah, it's like Nazism and global warming are actually intricately connected, despite the fact that Adolf Hitler, who was the preeminent creator of the ideas that led to Nazism, was an environmentalist.
That's pretty wow. That's pretty great. Yeah, you know, she is. I would actually like to go to one of the speeches or whatever she gives, and just you know, because again, it's one of those things where you hear about these things, but then you go and you're like, well, hey, like what actually happens there? So I think it'd be interesting to actually go there and say, hey, you know, I'm just listening and learning here to see and experience the event. Unfortunately, I don't live in New York or any of those other places, so it's hard. It'd be harder to go to, but and I might have mentioned this last time too, but I do just for a bit of a digression. I did actually try to attend a Trump rally. It was fine. I had to leave early because the rule apparently was once you're in, you're in, and it was a spur of the moment deal. I'm like, oh hey, I'm in town and Trump's in town, so I'll try and see what happens. But had other plans, so had it been a stay for a bit and leave, I would have stayed there. But it was a you know, to be fair, there are you know, oh, people on the right, left are crazy. Yes, well, we have people on the right that are crazy as well. So I can definitely attest to the fact that there are people who say whatever Trump says is great, CNN sucks, and blah blah blah. So it you know happens on both sides. But of course, the bigger difference there is the fact that we weren't having uh, the tension was not nearly as high at the Trump rallies as I can see. There, people are very friendly to each other and not, you know, trying to make sure that you have the same opinion. They're just a bit more outgoing with their opinions. They're not, you know, trying to pressure in any way. But anyway, yes, Cortez said some funny things there, which was crazy. But and I don't know why I just thought of this now, but you reminded me for some reason, Duff. That not a good segue, but did you hear the another story about the I want to say he was a journalist or something. I can't remember his exact title. The gentleman who went to Saudi Arabia and was like killed for getting a marriage thing, whatever. And now there's a giant, you know, international conflict with how Trump is going to handle Saudi Arabia and something or another. And I don't remember all the names, but that story. Do you remember that story?
Yeah, so the guy's name is Kamal Khashoggi, and he was a reporter for a variety of different outlets over his career, and a former Saudi citizen. And for some reason, either the Saudi government appears to have extended him essentially a pardon for some of his articles and things which he wrote. And so he was going in to get a divorce and a marriage license from the Saudi consulate in Turkey. Went in, did not come out. And we don't actually know what happened. There's, of course, a variety of rumors from, you know, he was beaten and thrown into a tank of acid so that there would be no body. But it ultimately comes off as a huge political blunder because we don't want our politicians, we don't want other countries' politicians to start offing people, but to do it so blatantly, especially when Turkey has been looking for every reason to make Saudi Arabia look bad. Not that there's many things that make Saudi Arabia look good, is just asinine on many levels, especially considering Khashoggi, as far as we can tell, had sympathies towards the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a Marxist Islamist group that funds a lot of more, let's say, soft organizations that try to infiltrate other governments, infiltrate local communities, and start Islamizing them in a way that is less overtly religious, but still results in the idea that everyone should become a Muslim, that non-Muslims should be prosecuted under the Sharia, and that Sharia law is the best thing for that particular country or any country. So he's quite the Citizen Kane, that Kamal Khashoggi, and sadly he's been killed, apparently.
And this is a big international um problem, obviously, because we are essentially trying to keep the peace. Or I guess I'm not exactly understanding the whole he said she said we're friends with them and kind of deal. Correct?
Well, I can give you some background on that there, AAA. So, what's coming out of this is essentially Turkey and Saudi Arabia have conflicting interests. And of course, the United States is tied to both, tied to Turkey through NATO and tied to Saudi Arabia through a series of treaties and a long-standing sort of friendly tort between the Americans and the Saudi royal family. And what this brings into contention is, what is the United States bound to do when one of its allies acts poorly towards a citizen of its own nation, but a citizen who has a green card in the United States and also a journalist? And the Democrats are jumping on this, especially because of Trump's rhetoric towards journalists, but more towards the established media complex, and trying to point out that he's the reason why Kamal gets killed. He's the reason why the Saudi government feels comfortable killing a reporter. All of which is so much paper mache, especially considering this is Turkey where it happened, where journalists have been being jailed by Erdogan's regime for literally the past 5 years. In fact, the press is heavily controlled. Saudi Arabia itself treats dissident reporters terribly. And to somehow try and make a connection between Trump and these two countries that have terrible reputations for how they treat journalists is about as straw man as you can get. And it's also an attack that implies that it's up to the US to police all international conventions. And it shouldn't be. This is something that the UN should be jumping on. And this is something which NATO potentially should be jumping on, because they have constituent members involved. So it's a really complicated situation, but it's also a really dumb situation.
I would agree with that. Did you hear any news about? I guess there was a recording of him actually being killed, or like, um, uh, killed, and then he was disembodied alive or something along those lines as well.
So once again, that information has been released by the Turkish government. Turkey has a massive hate boner for Saudi Arabia. So it's quite possible that those recordings are correct and are recording what they say they're recording, but it could also be just as correct to say that allegedly the Turks recorded them doing it to somebody and are like, hey, don't we have that recording of that guy being disembodied alive? Disemboweled alive? Maybe we should release it to the press and say that it's Khashoggi. So there isn't sufficient enough evidence to say that that recording at this point is of what they claim, especially considering the biases of the source that released it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Just that was. I remember that was a, of course, a bigger deal that no one seems to be talking about, and on the left there. But anyway, since we've described a important yet or unfortunate event, for some reason now you remind me of another. To move on to a bit of a happier topic. This is now a little bit older news, but the or I guess not as old news, but to get to the lighter news. Did you by chance see the trailer for or hear about a movie called Gosnell, Duff?
No, I have not. What's that about?
So Gosnell is I guess a bit of a documentary. It talks about the court case with the Dr. Gosnell, who was a abortion doctor, and apparently the story goes where he would try to convince as many girls as possible to get abortions, whether they wanted them or not. And so he actually ended up killing several women as they were trying to get an abortion. So, as I went into the clinic, he would say, "Hey, you need an abortion for these reasons," and sometimes they would, sometimes they wouldn't want to do it, but by their own free will. So there were several times where girls would come into the clinic and they wouldn't leave. And there's evidence where he had stashed baby parts in his house and kind of thing, and whatever else. So the movie is just about the awful atrocities that happen with abortions and that kind of thing. But it's interesting because when the movie first came out, it did pretty well. Hollywood is trying to get rid of the movie, even though it's doing well in theaters, because they don't think it's appropriate. And as far as I understand it, they actually had one of the main actors, Dean Cain, went on to Louder with Crowder, and he described the movie, and a it's a very dark and heavy movie because it talks about killing babies and that kind of thing. But at the same time, you could take your kids to it because it's not graphic. It doesn't show. I As far as I understand, there's nothing blood and guts and parts. They don't show that. They just kind of heavily imply, hey, here's a kitchen full of stuff, and here are containers full of whatever, and inside the containers you probably find feet and all this kind of fun stuff. So it doesn't actually show any fetuses being killed or anything on those lines, but it just has that whole feel of, hey, women were sent in here having one thought in mind, they were convinced otherwise, and just the whole debacle. So for our listeners out there and Duff as well, I would definitely say go watch the trailer. It is very it's very crucial to understand what about the issue itself, and to here's what happens in reality, or what can happen to abortions. And again, not saying that we can get into the it's your choice kind of deal, but it's there is a right way and a wrong way to do things, and this was definitely done the wrong way. So it was a very controversial film to be had. But yes, if you haven't seen that, I would definitely go and check that out. That would be it's a realistic yet tasteful movie, I would say overall. But so I take it you hadn't heard yet, so you hadn't even heard about that movie, Duff?
Nope, not particularly. Of course, small films in the States don't tend to get international attention, right? Just like many Canadian films don't see the light of day in the States.
I suppose that's fair. That's fair too. Well, speaking of the TV and movie industry, the I don't think we talked about this last time, but the are there any, I guess, American shows or movies and that have that you're I get or any shows that you're watching now that have maybe started in the States that have moved to Canada recently there for you?
Oh, almost all of our television, basically like 95% of it, is originating in the States in terms of TV shows and whatnot. But I have basically pulled up my anchor and gone onto the waters of Netflix as opposed to cable television. And even on Netflix, I don't tend to watch too much. The next one I'm waiting for isn't actually due out till I think 2020, which is The Witcher. I'd love to come back for that. But yeah, no, I don't tend to watch too much TV. I'm more of a
Got this.
podcast man now.
Well, that makes sense. I don't have, and again, forgive me if we ever discussed this, but had you heard about or watched any of the Tim Allen's The Last Man Standing?
Now, we have talked about that before, but that was rebooted by Fox, and
Correct.
apparently it's pulling in some of the biggest numbers for primetime comedy.
Yes. It is on its launch night. I believe they had a 1.8 rating and pulled in like 6 to 8 million viewers for the network. It was one of the biggest seen shows on Fox in, I want to say, years. It beat out several network TV shows, and it was a good episode. It was very if you haven't seen it yet, there's a lot of the trailer. It's in the trailer. This isn't a spoiler. It was in the trailer, but they basically talked to one of the characters. Kyle describes a TV show he loves and he can't find it anymore. And he basically just it's 30 seconds of them basically just bashing ABC for leaving the show. It's very entertaining. So if you are a fan of Tim Allen and like Home Improvement and just want to have a comedy or a TV show that doesn't just bash Trump and say, hey, here's politics. There are politics in Last Man Standing, but it does not set its home in politics. It's about guy who owns a business, who has a family, and the troubles he goes through and that kind of thing. And yes, politics is sprinkled in there, but it's a great reprieve from the infighting and all that kind of fun stuff. So definitely would recommend that. The only downside, I guess I would say, I've seen all the seasons thus far. The when they canceled Fox or the TV show, of course, many of the actors went to do different things. So now in the new series, or I'm sorry, the new season, two characters have been replaced. Boyd was the grandson of Tim Allen's character, and the Mandy's character by Molly Ephraim, I believe is her name. They both left the show. I guess she was doing something else at the time the show came back, so she was replaced, and Boyd was replaced. Boyd's character being replaced, not as big of a deal, only because it's kind of believable that time passed and he's gotten a little bit older. I believe he was 5 or 6 when the show ended in on ABC, and now he's, I believe, 12 in the new show. The one character that has a lot of controversy is Mandy. She was very funny because she was a ditzy kind of a pretty blonde, dumb character, but of course she had dark hair, which was made her more interesting. And she was very had a lot of good comedic timing. Now in the new show, Mandy is replaced by I think the actress name is Molly McCook, and the issue with the new character is the fact that the new Molly is much taller than the old Molly, and is also blonde, and it's a very I mean, you're changing. It's like trying to get a new car, and you're going from a, I don't know, Honda Civic to a Hummer. I mean, it's a pretty big freaking difference. And they kind of like, oh yeah, she's new, and I mean, the hair is one thing, but like she's like a foot taller than the original character, so it's very, it's just it's hard to get used to. And her scenes are okay. And again, I've only seen the one episode. I was trying to wait for the other ones to come out, but it's jarring and it's not easy to pill to swallow. Hopefully she'll grow on me. The for a little trivia, the character who plays Kristen, she was a different actress in season 1, and then seasons 2 through now she's the same actress. And I actually kind of prefer the one in season 1 personally, but again, she's grown on me. So anyway, long story short, Tim Allen is back on Last Man Standing. That's on Fox, so you should go watch that if you want to have a TV show that's family friendly and not gonna drive you crazy with some things. But I wanted to sorry about that. Wanted to make sure that you knew that was a thing there. And it sounds like Duff, you have limited interests on Netflix, which I guess is good and bad. But just curious now that besides The Witcher, nothing else is really even nothing else you're even watching right now, Netflix wise or TV wise.
Yeah, not really. So right now, I'm spending most of my free time with several books, which have been really awesome, that were released by a variety of people. So, for example, The Coddling of the American Mind by Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt, a book called So You've Been Publicly Shamed by John Ronson, and Unfuckology by an author named Amy Alcon. So those have been things which have been taking up my free time.
Oh, interesting. Actually, we speaking of books, I when I watch the Shapiro Show, every time he gives me a book listing, I go and try to save those in Amazon to see if I want to go buy any of those books, because he usually has not every single book of his that I love, but there's a lot of books there that are of interest. Speaking of, actually, let's see. For anyone who listens to the show, you recognize in the latest episode, Mr. Shapiro had recommended a book called Once and Future Worker, a vision of the renewal of work in America by Oren Cass. And then there are a few more here. The Future What Once Happened, Absolute Monarchs, The Gulag Arpeggio, a few things like that. So these are all books about the future of once. The Future Once Happened Here, by Fred Siegel, I think is just the mob mentality, mob rule. Absolute Monarchies is about the church by John Julius Norwich. And then The Gulag Arpeggio, 1918 through 1956, experiment in literary investigation, basically talking about how certain governmental ideas can be really bad, by Alexander Wow, go listen to the Shapiro Show. I can't pronounce any of these names, but anyway, good. Those were the books that Mr. Shapiro mentioned. But anyway, that's
Alexander Solzhenitsyn.
I'm sorry.
Was the book by Alexander Solzhenitsyn?
Oh, if that's how you pronounce it, then sure. That was just the whatever. That was what. I'm sorry. That was on Mr. Shapiro and Mr. Peterson recommended that
Yes.
book.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was I take. Have you do you know or have read it, Duff?
I have heard of it. I would like to read Gulag Archipelago, but right now on Amazon, its price got jacked up because so many people are trying to read it right now. So I'll wait. I'll wait for the price to drop a little bit again. But of course, Alexander Solzhenitsyn is in the press a lot. Jordan Peterson recently wrote a new introduction to the latest release of Gulag Archipelago, but he also had a couple other books which he released too. If we're thinking of the same guy.
Yeah, I just it was the I don't when I'm at work and I listen to these things I don't not necessarily always get to see the book, but that's just the no, I'm sorry, it was I watched a TV show I guess of Jordan Peterson talking with Dr. Oz about ideologies and kind of things. And he mentioned the book on the show, so I googled it really quick. Which again, if you watch, I would also recommend people go to YouTube and Google Dr. Oz talks or interviews Dr. Jordan Peterson. That is a 2.5, almost 3 hour interview when they just talk about Jordan Peterson, what he does, all of his ideas, and his history. And it's just a um, very good interview describing, all of what Jordan Peterson went through and that kind of thing. It's just very honest, and it's it's almost a TV podcast, blah blah blah. It's a very good hybrid thing to do. But anyway, I wanted to before we close out here, I wanted to make a mention at the very least, and I hope you can watch this too, Duff. The as last week we were told, or geez, I don't even know how long ago now. Nikki Haley wants to or has resigned from being the ambassador to the U.S. and we need to go find a new one. But if you didn't already see it, there is and you might see this on Facebook or YouTube, but Nikki Haley gave I guess, a farewell speech, and it was very funny. She made fun of basically everyone, and it was, I guess you could call, very, very non-PC. So I would recommend everyone go watch that. She makes fun of in the first 15, 20 seconds. She just says, "I'm not supposed to make fun of Trump," and she just makes a joke on that and jokes about the Democratic Party and everyone who wants to run. And again, and the best news is, some people are literally right there. She goes, "Hey, you're Giuliani, or you are Chuck Schumer," and she just makes fun of them to their face. So very funny stuff there. Definitely would highly recommend going to see that and kind of thing. So hopefully, we should get some more comedy here and get some more optimism overall. But with that being said, Duff, do you see hopefully nothing criminal really happens there? But I guess, do you think that things will get better or worse after the elections here in I guess a few days?
After the midterms, I have a feeling we'll see a couple of demonstrations. I have a feeling that whether or not whether or not anything of substance does happen, there will be a lot of narratives that are generated, which will carry through into the elections, which will be coming up. Is it 2 years after that?
Yes, we have them. The next election will be 2020.
Yeah. So either way, it's going to be a sounding board. But to, I guess, Trump's credit, right now there isn't a lot of ammunition for them to go after. And if, as Mr. Shapiro always likes to say, if they can keep the Twitters out of his hands, it might be a bit of a non-entity. Because, of course, in the last literally 5 days, what have we heard about Kavanaugh? What have we heard about anything going on internationally? Albeit there's a bit of a stink over Trump saying he wishes to pull out of an agreement with Russia over nuclear proliferation.
I just saw that one, yeah.
But even that is kind of a non-issue because the treaty itself seems to be focused on technologies which have long since kind of gone out of use, and in fact, which all the nations that have nuclear bombs are well in excess of, except for, let's say, North Korea and maybe Pakistan. So to say we need to renegotiate this old deal, that Trump decided to make it a public thing is a bit of a question mark, because generally what would just happen is essentially diplomats would go, hey, we need to renegotiate this treaty, or we need to negate it because it's no longer useful. So we'll see what they're trying to make out of this. It might be Trump trying to wring concessions. He seems pretty good at that. The new international trade deal that's replacing NAFTA seems to give the U.S. a bit more than they had previously. So he does have a strategy, and we'll see if someone actually figures out a counter strategy before too long. But yeah, there's not too much for the Democrats to kind of jump on the back of. And if Trump stays off the Twitters, probably they won't get anything.
That's true. That's true. Well, and so I guess to one final thought, would you say that the if predictions are true, and let's say that the Republicans keep the Senate, but the Democrats get the House, will we see I guess a lot of stagnation, kind of going back on what Trump did, or do you think that anything good happen if we do have the one party rules, other party rules, a certain place kind of deal?
Um, well, what I'd point to is this. Early in Trump's presidency, he was actually quite buddy-buddy with the leaders of the Democrat Party, to the chagrin of a lot of the Republican leadership. So as far as the president's concerned, he seems to be able to deal with pretty much whoever he has to deal with. Whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing in terms of your policy positions, I don't know. But what it'll point to once again is when a party has both houses in the states, they seem to have a hell of a time actually doing what they want to do, which is just so odd. Because it's like you have the majority in both the Senate and in the Congress, yet you can't get anything done, even if your president is on side as well. So that might be an example of checks and balances working a little too well, or maybe working as well as they should to ensure that nobody gets to railroad through their policy positions simply because they have a majority in two of the houses of government.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, that we don't want to change too many things. I think I did hear about when it was Kavanaugh hearings a lot about the president or other parties wanting to get more justices inside the Supreme Court, and going from we had 5 and then 7 and 9, wanting to raise it even farther there. But I don't know, Duff. Do you think that 9's good enough, or do you think we should go higher or lower there, or is that just a good sweet number?
Um, Essentially, you could do it with three people. Uh, all you need is the potential for a majority. So you can't have an even number of judges, because an odd number means statistically you can't have gridlock, right? Unless someone abstains. Whereas if you have an even number, you increase the likelihood of gridlock on a lot of things. So the number of judges isn't so much an issue, so long as there's an odd number. It's, are they actually getting through enough cases in the year to justify their particular position? So if a major event happened 5 years ago and they don't get it to it till now, that might be a little bit too long. So if you're going to increase the number of justices, you want to increase the number of cases which they get put through. But in any instance, it'll still come down to, are you choosing judges because they have the same political affiliation as you? If so, getting a majority of them on the judiciary means that that party has a significant power backing them that is unelected. Or are you electing your judges because they're good, or you're appointing your judges because they're good at their job? And if it's because they're good at their job, it shouldn't matter what political leaning they have. They look at the law as is and interpret it. And if they feel the law needs to change, then they should make a motion which they will then put to the Congress for the Congress to adjust the law. And that's the way it's supposed to work. So this whole thing about more justices, less justices, is a bit of a red herring, because all they're really meaning is we want people with our political affiliation because we don't trust literalists. And regardless of political affiliation, in my opinion, I would rather have a literalist who's honest about, this is what the law says. Maybe we need to change it. Let's turn it over to Congress and see if they want to change it.
I think that's fair. And okay, I mean, not to get down the road, I guess my next question would have been, if I guess the fear would have been 3 is good, and then you have to make sure that they're really really good. But well, I guess so. Maybe hopefully this will be lastly. Would you say that a lifetime appointment is needs to change, or you think lifetime appointment is good where it is?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, because if someone's really good at their job, of course you want them to stay on as long as possible. But we do know that in terms of, let's say, ability and energy, you start to ebb as you get older. So you don't want the incentive to be, I'm going to stay on here because it's a power trip. So to have a lifetime appointment, you run into the problem of, well, what if someone ages out and just won't go, but they don't meet the qualifications to be kicked off the court? You want people who are interested in the law, want to do cases, and are good at what they do, and also have sound enough mind that if they realize they can't do what they were doing, or they're falling asleep during deliberation, kind of thing, maybe they should step aside. So it might just be better to say, let's make it so that it is a duration of your stay, so however long you can go, provided there aren't that many provisos, and make sure the provisos are quite clear, but also incentivize judges to say, like, if you don't want this, you can step away at any time, and it's not negative. And in fact, you go back into the pool and could get reappointed. So you could have judges going in on and off the court and doing things with their various legal, sorry, with their various companies and working with other courts. And that actually might be a better system, because then you have good judges going on and off the Supreme Court, but also working within the other judiciary systems.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, it's a definitely a something to think about, given that's the justices are there for life, and senators and other representatives have to be voted in every time. So just another thought there. But well, that sounds good, man. We ended on a much happier note. So that was the goal. Well, hopefully everyone, I would definitely say go out and vote. We are getting close to the election cycle there. I myself need to go make sure that I know all the things I need to do before voting happens, and so please go out there. And if actually, let me say precursor, if you know the issues and the people, please vote. If you don't know what's going on, then I would say learn it, then go vote. But if you don't know the day, then maybe voting is not a good idea. But we definitely need to go out there and vote and have our voices heard. Otherwise, hopefully, everyone, we have a much happier news week here ahead of us, and everyone has good weather-wise and that kind of fun stuff. So until then, we will keep looking at the news here and hope for good things. But that would do it for right now. We will see you guys next week. Duff, want to say goodbye?
Have a great week, everyone.
All right, everyone, stay safe out there. We will see you next time. Thank you.